Yep. Good evening, everyone. So, previous session we learnt about how to create a React application and the application flow. We discussed about that. So, what we learnt, two techniques we learnt about creating React application. One, how to use React in an existing web application, and second, how to create a separate React application using Webpack bundler. We are using NPX. NPX uses which one? Webpack. So there are so many types of bundling tools. We can use Parcel, White, and Webpack. So Node.js is using this Webpack. And I explained the flow, how the flow works. I given an overview about that, right? So we learned about high level design, how an React application works. That is beginning level flow, how React application works. Later, once you are aware of the technology, then you will learn in depth. I explained these two flows. This is high level, how request will be processed and response will come from a React application. Another one, in this internally, how the process happens. That means when you request a React application, it will first load static DOM. Static DOM that is coming from which page? Index.html. After that, it will load index.js, which will load all the dependencies required. Then a component is loaded. By default, application have a component called app component. In that app component, the initial presentation is designed, which we render by using new technique. Actually, in old version, how to render? In old version, we use React DOM.render method. In the new version of React, which is 18x version, we have to use which one? Create root. So this is the basic flow of a React application, how React application works. So today what we are going to learn, how to add components in this application and how different techniques we can implement, right? So what new here you will see is, today we will see, so this is component. Today we will see components in a React 18 environment. Components in React 18x environment, how we design and all. So what is a component and how the component works? We discussed in the previous sessions. If you missed out those sessions, once go through the previous videos in our community. There we already discussed about components, but what we done is we designed everything in one page. But now when you are creating a component, what is the basic infrastructure in app is traditionally, so every component comprises of three files. So one is component have a JSX file, JSX or JS, you can add any. Another component have a CSS and component have test.js. So, or in some applications, it can be component.spec.js. So when you are building application traditionally at high level, every component can have three files. All are not mandatory. One is mandatory. One JSX is mandatory. So what is present in JSX? The presentation, logic, everything is defined in which file? JSX. So JSX.jsx comprises of design and logic. Design and logic is present in JSX. Design and logic is present in JSX. So .css comprises of styles. It will have all the styles. Whatever styles are required for the file, we have to define in this CSS. And .test.js comprises of test cases. Generally, test cases are written by using some testing framework. Usually, test cases are written by using Jest. Jest framework is used in our React. Later, you will learn about how to write the tests for testing an component. So what is testing? What is the concept of testing? We have some technical word about that. What is the concept of testing? Actually, technical concept is testing is checking as is and to be. So as is and to be. As is means what our developer designed. To be means what client wants. If as is equal to be, that means test pass, because what you designed is what client wants. If as is not matching to be, that means test fail. Testing is not about whether your logic is working or not. That is generally we call as compiling, and we call it as debugging, and finding the bugs and fixing the bugs. That is error handling. So testing is not about error handling. Testing means checking whether it is matching the client requirement. That means suppose client wants a title called welcome, but your title is having a different word, that is mismatch. It will compile successfully, it will run successfully, but that is not what client wants. Client is expecting some value, but your mathematical evaluation returns some wrong value. It processed successfully, compiled successfully, output came successfully, but that is not the value I am expecting. That means it is failed test. Testing is about verifying whether it is matching or not. Generally, in our React, we use Jest as a framework for testing. JavaScript based technologies, so many frameworks are there. We are going to use this Jest. Later, you will learn about that. So out of all these, which one is mandatory? Out of all these, which one is mandatory? JSX. JSX. Is it necessary to have all these? Not required. JSX is minimum mandatory. CSS and test, that depends. You want testing, then add that. So later we will learn about it. CSS regularly we use. So, and how do we link the CSS to JSX file? Generally, how do we link the CSS to JSX file is, this is not a HTML page, right? So what we have to do is import CSS into JSX. So we have to import CSS into JSX component. I will show how to import and define. So we have to use import, and you have to define the file .css. That depends on where the file is, where you kept the file. So this is the basic. So let's see how to create a component, how to design a component and how to use the component. So I will go to my project. Already we created a project. I showed you this entire process in our previous class. So we created a project React Shopping, and how this project starts. What is the process to start? We learned about it. What is npm start? Technical word is there. Na? What is npm start? It is a batch program. It is a batch program. So that batch program comprises of some set of sequence statements which executes with one name. So you can start your project, but before that, first here we have to follow some rules. What is another rule? So every component must be in src folder. Every component must be in src folder. It is mandatory. If you keep in any another place and try to access, it will not work because the project is mapped to src mapping. How that mapping works, that you will learn when you create a project by yourself. That we will see at the end. I told you now, we will install Webpack and Parcel or White like tools, and we will learn how to build from scratch. But for that, you need to learn complete technology. So internally, all the components are mapped to which folder? SRC. Another important, every static resource like resources like images, docs, JSON, everything. So JSON files. So all these, etc. must be in public folder. They must be in public folder. So any mismatch, it will not work. That means by mistake you placed in some place, because in general web development, what you do, you can put a file in any folder and you can access with reference of the path dot slash, you use some path reference. That will fail here. In React, it is not possible. So where you keep the resource, so the location matters because the mapping is set like that. So make sure that you are defining here. So what we need to do, let's go to the component here. So I will go to the src. In src already there are so many files. We don't want to mess up our files like this. I will create a separate folder, components. Yep. So we create a folder called components here. And for every component, better to maintain a folder because every component have 3 files usually. So instead of scattering everywhere, just maintain a folder. I will create a folder called some login. In that login folder, so we are adding 3 files. What are the 3 files? One is login.component.jsx. Remember, this is just a tradition of giving the name component as suffix. It's not required, just tradition. Traditionally for components, we give like this, but it is not required in React. So you can give file name anything, it doesn't matter, but extension should be JSX. So traditionally we give like this, but it's not required. So another one is, I will add another file. What is it? Login.component.css. Another file. So login.component.test.test.js. This is a test file. These are three different files. That is the JSX file, this is the CSS file, and this is the test file. That is the test file. So we are having these options. Okay. Now how to design a component? Let's go to the JSX. And here we need to configure. You learned JavaScript module systems, ES module systems. Every JavaScript file is considered as a module. And in a module, whatever you declare, a class or a function or a variable is not accessible outside the module. If you want to access anything outside the module, then you have to mark it as what? Export. You know JavaScript module systems, right? So in JavaScript module system, it is important to mark every function and every class by using export. Export what? Function. And you can create by using function or you can create by using class, right? So function, first we are learning function components. Later we will learn about class component. Function, what is the name? Here we are having the login component. All component rules are same. What are the component rules? We discussed all component rules. Component rules like what? Every component name must start with an uppercase letter. Component should return a JSX element, only one element, and JSX related some rules also we learned. So what to return? We need to return one element. We are using an container, and in this we are designing some screen. Suppose I said I'm creating a form, and in this we have a heading. So this heading says some user login, and we are designing some content there. So data list, some data term, some user name, and this is just a design. Input type is equal to text, and we know that every element is a self-ending element. So password, and we are following the JavaScript rules, and we are creating a simple design here. So button and login. Okay. Now the component is ready. How to keep this component in the startup? To keep the component in the startup, our application should start with this component. Actually, it is starting with which component? App. So we will go to terminal and run the project. npm start. So we are starting our project. It will host our project in a web server, which is created by Webpack. So, and automatically it launches our React application. Now what we need to do is, by default application starts with app component. We need to keep this login as startup. As of now, every day what we do is, we will create a component, we practice some design in that, and we will keep it in the startup. Later what you will do is, you will create one app with complete navigation. That means every time you don't need to keep in the startup. So you will create one navigation, user will stay on one page and can access everything from that page. That later we will do. Initially, every day what we will do, we will create one component, we will practice some design in this, and we will keep it in the startup. Currently it is starting with which component? It is starting with the app. It is starting with the app component. We need to keep our login component in the startup. So where to make the change? We have to go to index.js. In index.js, we have to change the app component. Already we learned what is this. It is going to create virtual DOM render, right? We need to import our component first. What is the component? Import. Import is what? Login. Login component from the components. And once you import, you keep that in the startup. how to keep in the startup? Login. Login component is in the startup. Now our application starts with that login component here. That means we created the component and we are starting with that particular component. This is how we add the component and keep in the startup initially. Now how to add styles to this? So what we need to do, we want some styling. You cannot add styles directly here. So you can add inline styles. Later you will learn about style binding. You know inline styles, how they are added. Separately, we will go to login.css. In that CSS, we will add styles. But here, careful. The issue in React CSS is generally in CSS, how you select elements. You use CSS selectors. You know CSS selectors. Different selectors are there. Type selector, ID selector, class selector, relational selectors, structural selectors, dynamic pseudo classes. So many are there. Hundreds of CSS selectors are there. So make sure that you are not using type selector. If you use a type selector, it will affect to every component in this app. So always better use IDs or use the classes. Don't use the type selectors. If you want in every component it is appearance same, then use a type selector. Otherwise it will affect everywhere. So what we will do now, so we will create a class. You know classes are designed with dot. So login form. And what is the effect for that login form? So just temporarily I am adding border as so 1 pixel solid gray and padding as 20 pixel and some border radius. Border radius we defined as 10 pixel. Like this we are defined. So and this is login form and we have another one. Another one is page container. And the page container, this is login form and this is suppose login container. In the login container, I given display flex. I given justify content center. Like this we are giving. Now what we need to do is these two classes we want to apply to this component. Then how to use CSS here? We have to first import. Import which file? CSS file. CSS file dot slash login dot component dot CSS. Dot slash y. Current folder is referred with dot slash. One level back means dot dot slash. You know the path reference how we give. Now where to apply the container? Class name. Class name. What is it? Login container. Login container class name is applied. It will come center. And for form, we will apply the class name. What is it? Form, not form container. Which one? Yeah, it is login form. That means here we need to define login form. So login form, then it will get that form appearance and display. So for login container, suppose what I am doing. So login container height as 100 VH. VH is viewport height. And we will give align items as center. Then vertically, horizontally center. That is how we design a component in React. So we just created one component. So we are adding the content into the component. We are adding some styles to this component and defining the styles. This is the basic approach. So I hope everyone is clear. But we will not use the third file now. Third file don't add because third file is testing file. Later when you learn testing, you can add it. As of now, not required to add a test file. You need two files regularly. Even CSS also not required every time. We can have one file. What is it? .jsx. CSS is optional. Only when you need styling separately, you can configure that. Right? This is basic approach of creating a component. So example, I will post here to you. So first step, what we do is add a new folder by name components. into SRC. Right. Second, add. Yep. So next we have to add following files. So we need one is login dot following files into login folder. Login dot component dot JSX. Login dot component dot CSS. Login dot component dot test.js. We need these three. This is the basic of adding the component. Design, I will copy this and I will upload into the classroom notes. You can go through that design. One is login component dot what JS. This is the design. Let me copy the design of component and the login dot component dot CSS. CSS also I will define. How to configure CSS and how to configure the login. We are creating this. So this is the basic, and one more work what you have to do is go to index.js and set login as startup. That means what happens in React dot strict mode. So in React strict mode, we have to define that login component. Importing and everything is same. So you have to just set up this. When you use login, it will automatically import. Otherwise, you have to manually import. So what is difference between our previous approach and now is, in previous approach, we designed everything in index.html, but now we will maintain separate files and we import them and we keep in the startup. That is one point. Now, what else you learned in a previous approach? How to make the styles more better by using Bootstrap. So in everyday designs, we will use a lot of styling. Then for that, we need which one? Bootstrap. So in this project, how to enable Bootstrap, because every day we will use regularly for designs. So let's see. So now in this, how to set up the Bootstrap. So set up Bootstrap for React application. How to set up Bootstrap for React application, we'll see. How do we set up Bootstrap for React application? So first thing, install Bootstrap and icons for project. You have to do npm install Bootstrap icons and save. You have to install Bootstrap icons and save. So after installing, Bootstrap and Bootstrap icons are not ready to use. So we have to import them. So first you need to install Bootstrap and Bootstrap icons. So let's see this. So what we will do here is we will go to our project. This is our terminal, and see in one terminal already our app is running. So we will not disturb this. We will take a new terminal and here we will run npm install Bootstrap icons and save. We are downloading and installing Bootstrap for our project. And once it is installed, By default, Bootstrap is not working. Bootstrap is not working for your project. So Bootstrap is installed successfully, but currently there are no traces of Bootstrap here. That means, for example, Bootstrap related one icon I will keep here. Class name BI person fill. That is a Bootstrap icon. And you see there is no trace of that icon. Bootstrap icons you installed, Bootstrap you installed, but it is not still working because you have to go to index.js. So where you want to use Bootstrap, we want to use Bootstrap everywhere in the project. So we have to import in index.js. How to import? You see, anywhere you can import, doesn't matter. Already there is import. Import from where to import? // We have a folder called node modules. What are the files? What are the files required for Bootstrap? Already I told you in previous session. Those we need to link. One is what? Bootstrap dist CSS. What is it? Bootstrap.css. That is one file. What is another file? Import // node modules, Bootstrap icons. In that what? Font Bootstrap icons dot what? CSS. Once you link these two files in the index, now it is working. Icons are working. Bootstrap is also working. Let's set up the Bootstrap here. To set up the Bootstrap in our component, what I am doing here is, for example, already some CSS is working here. For this button, I will put a class btn warning and w100. And you can see that is the button style. And for text boxes, we are applying a class called what? Form control. And for password also, I am applying a class called form control. And you can see the appearance looks like this. Now we are applying some Bootstrap here. But Bootstrap is not just only styling. Bootstrap has some interactions, carousels, navbars, pop-ups. So those interactions will not work. Those interactions require Bootstrap JavaScript to include. We have to include Bootstrap JavaScript. Actually, when you are designing web applications, that Bootstrap related all components logic. How many components are there? So many. Can you name some Bootstrap components? Alerts, carousels, navbars, badges, scroller spy, so many, off canvas, models. These all are Bootstrap components we use in regular development. And those components are all kept in one file. What is that file? Bootstrap.bundle.js. That file contains all the components related logic. That means now if you want to use that logic here, what we have to do is in index, you have to import Bootstrap. You have to import Bootstrap. So from the library of Bootstrap, you have to import Bootstrap from Bootstrap. This is not CSS. This is Bootstrap related one module. This is a Bootstrap module. And see this module, this Bootstrap module is present inside the Bootstrap location. Actually, this is a module. And this Bootstrap module contains all the Bootstrap related logic. Now what happens is, so here in the design, now I am creating this login form as an alert. So I'm giving an alert some warning. So alert dismissible. Like this we define, and usually it looks like this. And we will put a simple button at the top and the class btn and btn close, and actually close button will come there. And on click of close, it should close. It should close. Then usually we will put a data bs dismiss. Dismiss is equal to, it should dismiss which one? Alert. Actually this button type should be which button? So it should be button, not a submit button. Otherwise default button type is submit. That means this login should close. That means the functionality is also working here. We are having the functionality also here, right? Usually we can handle the functionality like this. So this time it is little different. You install Bootstrap, then you have to import Bootstrap related CSS, icons related CSS, and the module, in which location we have to import in index.js. Then it is able to access anywhere. In any component, you can access Bootstrap and its effects, and you can use it. So what we need to do now? So the next point, so go to index.js and import. So we need to import /node modules bootstrap dist css bootstrap.css. That is one file. Another, you have to import node modules bootstrap icons. So in that dist, sorry, this is font. We have bootstrap icons.css. And one more thing you have to import. Import what? Bootstrap from which location? Bootstrap. This is all for the scripting. These two are CSS related. This one is JavaScript related. Actually, what is the purpose of this one? So imports all components of Bootstrap. It will import all components of Bootstrap. All components of Bootstrap, like, so what are the components? Like we have carousels, we have navbars, we have off canvas. So we have like models. So many will be there. So many components will be there. So if you have this, then you can add more effects and you can make it better. So we are setting up a React application with the Bootstrap, so that in regular designs we use. React have another library called React MUI, Material UI, that you will see later. Because for that you need to learn complete about components, then we can use that. That means React people have their own Material UI, which is a component library like Bootstrap. Buttons, forms, calendars, all such components are readily available. We can just use them in our projects. So, but for that you need to learn about all the concepts of components. Okay, this is Bootstrap. Once you enable Bootstrap, I will give an example. I made some changes in this component. Which component? Login component what? JSX. I will copy this code. I made some changes into this. These are the changes. I am nothing but I added some Bootstrap classes and I added some Bootstrap effects, Bootstrap styling, Bootstrap effects. This is just one example. Later in every example, we are going to use this and handle it. So this is the basic setup of a React application. So what you have to learn, how to create a React application. You need to understand how React application starts. You need to understand how to add components into React application and keep them in the startup, and how to add styling to those components, enabling Bootstrap and working with Bootstrap. Once you are good, now we need to learn more techniques about components. And very major, the first important technique in components you are going to learn is data binding. You need to understand about data binding in React, how the concept of data binding works. So first point, there are so many technical concepts about data binding. Level by level, we will explore. There is no hurry, right? Because a lot of doubts will come. Once you start learning, you will clarify with all those doubts. You will get clarified with them. First, what is the concept of data binding? In web application, data binding is nothing but it is a technique of accessing data from one source and binding to the UI, user interface. That means data is kept in some source. It may be a variable. It may be some API source. Later, it may be coming from database. Accessing data from the source and displaying in the UI. We will see all techniques, how to communicate with APIs, how you get from database, everything we will learn. Initially, how we can access data from a source and display in UI. Generally, how JavaScript manages data binding. How JavaScript manages data binding. So actually, in JavaScript, suppose you are having in JavaScript, in JavaScript, you are having a simple paragraph. Now we have some data. So data is kept in a variable. Variable have some username is equal to some variable. Data is kept in a variable. Now we need to display this data in paragraph. What to do? What you do in JavaScript, there is some data in source. You need to access the data and display. Then actually, first point is you need an event. You need an event. Event is required on body load, on button click. Usually page have one event. What is that event? On load. That means on that particular event. So that means, for example, on load is an event. This event is written for which section? Body. On load, what we have to do? Collect the data from the source and display in the paragraph. Then you need a lot of DOM methods. What are those? Document dot what? Query selector. And what is it? Paragraph dot what? Inner text or text content. You display what is it? Uname. This is how you bind the data in JavaScript. In JavaScript, we bind the data in this way. If you learn jQuery, jQuery will simplify this little bit. Later, if you know jQuery will simplify this. We use dollar. In jQuery, what we do is we use dollar and we use P in the paragraph. And in the paragraph, just we put text and we put uname. That's it. jQuery simplifies the logic. jQuery intention is write less and do more. That is the main slogan of jQuery. JavaScript does in a lengthy way. jQuery is little bit simple and React is more simple. In React, how we can access the data and bind the data. Let's see how we can access and bind the data. So what is the concept of data binding in React? Just one example I will show you. For this, I will create another component now. In the components folder, I will add a new folder called data binding. Okay, I will add a new file called data binding.what JSX. So export, what is it? Function data binding. Just return a simple container and we will put here data binding. That is the heading. We want this in the startup. So index.js, we will remove login component and we will put which one? Data binding. Data binding. Yep. So we are keeping this data binding in the startup. Now, once I save this and you can see it starts with the data binding. Okay. Now here I will go and I will declare in this function In this function, I'm declaring a variable. What is it? User name. In that variable, we store some data, John. In this paragraph, we want to display that. Then simply we just put a binding expression in a curly brace. You learnt already JavaScript data binding expression. In JavaScript data binding expression is dollar curly brace. You learn JavaScript string handling data binding you learnt. Here in React, simple. That is what binding expression is defined in a curly brace. You just access. So you have some text. Text is what? Hello. And we want that user name. That's it. That means it will get that and it will display that here. That's a very simple technique. That means we access the data and display the data. There are no more DOM methods. Get element by ID, get query selector. You don't need that. You just access the data and display in the UI. Later, so many are there, we will discuss. But initially, data binding is very simple process here. Just what we need to do, we need to put a binding expression here and we just get what? Unit. And remember, currently, just to make you understand about data, I am declaring a variable and storing the data. But in reality, in React.js, we don't store data in variables. Variables are not recommended to store the data. Why? I will explain later. As of now, to practice temporarily understand data binding concept, we will keep some data in a variable because you are coming from JavaScript background, then you know about variables. But what is problem with variable later? Why we don't use variables? Then how to store data in a component? All we will learn. It is a very detailed concept to understand. Temporarily to learn data binding, keep data temporarily in which location? A variable. As of now, you just try so that first you will understand different types of data. Then later you can manage, right? Initially create a variable, store some data, and how we can access? Simple. Here there is no event, there is nothing. And remember, accessing the data and displaying in the UI. This is one-way binding. One-way binding. One-way binding means accessing from the source and displaying in the UI. If anybody modifies in the UI, then it should reflect back and go and store in the source. That is called as what? Two-way binding. I told you already in React features, React supports only one way. Then how to handle two-way binding? To handle two-way binding, we have to use additional techniques, which I will show how to do that. By default, React supports which type of binding? One way. Why it doesn't support two-way binding? I will show you. Actually, we will use a text box. Input type is a text box. In the text box, we want to display that username. In the text box, we want to show the username. Then text box have a property called what? Value. In the value property, we will put a dynamic. Dynamic is coming from which location? User name. And that username will come and display here. Now, when I click inside and try to modify that, I am using some backspace or delete. It's not working. It is feeling like read only. It is read only actually. That means we cannot do any modification. If it is not allowing any modification, just accessing the data and displaying it, then this is what? One-way binding. So React internally supports one-way binding. It doesn't support two-way binding. Many technologies support two-way binding. What is two-way binding is you do some modification, it will update back into the source. React default will not support, but without two-way binding, how? We need to explicitly implement. So we have to write some logic and explicitly we have to implement two-way binding. That later I will show you. So by default, what is the data binding technique used by React? One-way binding. One-way binding is accessing from the source and updating in the UI and don't allow to modify in the UI. Don't allow to modify. Even they try to modify, it will not modify. It is fixed, read only like. Then we have to enable two-way binding explicitly with user various techniques. So What is the concept of data binding? So data binding is nothing but data binding is a technique of accessing data from source and updating and binding to UI elements. Accessing data from source and binding to UI elements. It also involves identifying the changes in data from UI and update back into source. However, React.js will not support two-way data binding implicitly. It supports only one-way binding. It supports only one-way binding. Only one-way binding. So how it does? Generally, JavaScript requires various DOM methods to handle data binding. It requires various DOM methods to handle data binding. React uses data binding expression. Data binding expression, that is this block, uses data binding expression. Data binding expression is defined in this block. So syntactically how it works is where username, some username, and in the paragraph, hello, and just username. That is the variable. Welcome to React. Something like this we are adding. That is just a simple binding technique. Now, as a React developer, you need to understand how to bind different types of data. Because binding every type of data is not in the same way how you do in general JavaScript. There are some techniques to understand. In JavaScript, already you know how you present your numbers, how you present your strings, how you present your booleans, right? So you know different data types of JavaScript, how you present in JavaScript. So React developers should know some techniques and tricks to present different types of data, which contains JavaScript techniques and some additional techniques. Actually, so binding various data types. Let's see how we can bind various data types. How we can bind different data types. So that you will understand how different data types are handled. And in JavaScript, what are various data types you have? JavaScript primitive types. So primitive types. JavaScript primitive types, we have a number, we have a string, we have a boolean, we have null, so we have undefined, so we have undefined, and we have a symbol. and we also have a begin. These are all JavaScript primitive types. I am talking about JavaScript means advanced level ES6 and higher versions, right? JavaScript is just JavaScript, and in higher versions of JavaScript, ES5, ES6 and higher versions, there are so many new things, just what usually old developers don't know, right? So that means 10 years back JavaScript, 5 years back JavaScript, those days gone, right? We are in the modern generation of JavaScript. You have to upgrade yourself with several new JavaScript skills. That means several new concepts which are regularly used in React like technologies. And these are primitive data types. So we have a number, we have a string, boolean, null, undefined, symbol, and begins. Let's see different data types, what changes are there. That means what new things we need to understand here. So first we will learn. So these are primitive types. What are non-primitive types? JavaScript non-primitive. So non-primitive types. So non-primitive types, you will learn about how to handle array. So we'll learn about an object. We have like a map and set. Set is outdated node. We don't use much. Map is there. And obviously you will learn about how to handle the dates. That is an explicit type. So this is date types, how to manage the date type. Date is not a non-primitive type. These are additional types. So I keep this in additional types. So we have a date type, how we handle the date type. And we have another type. What is it? Regular expression type. These are some additional types you need to know. How to deal with these all types of data in React. So what is the job of React developer is your backend technologies like Java, .NET, PHP, Python, all these, they provide APIs with some data. We need to access the data and create a presentation for them. Then a developer should know how to handle different types of data. This is where you need to be very strong in your knowledge of data types of JavaScript. So let's see how we handle this. First, we will see handling number type. Means how do you bind the numbers? What are the points about numbers? So what are considered as numbers in JavaScript? What are considered as numbers in JavaScript? In JavaScript number includes what it includes? It includes signed integer, unsigned integer, floating point, double, decimal. We have big int. So, and it have exponent. We have binary. So we have hexadecimal and we have octa. This all comes under numbers. JavaScript numbers means signed integers, unsigned integers, floating points, double decimals, big int, exponent, binary, hexa, octa. These are all different JavaScript number types. That means JavaScript will treat these as numbers. It will treat any of these as numbers. Signed integers, unsigned integers, you know already. So signed integer, suppose minus 32. Unsigned integer is some 32. Floating point, suppose 4.5. Double, so suppose double. Decimal places with more than 2 or 3, these are decimal. Big int is a large number with n as suffix. This is new JavaScript data type. You know about this, right? One second. Okay, so this is a big int. Big int is what? N as a suffix, because you know that in JavaScript generally it is not. 1 second, I need to take all. Yep. So here we see we are dealing with a number. Let's put a number here. So where some n as a number and some lengthy number. And this number we have to deal in JavaScript. Then usually JavaScript will not treat this as a safe integer. It will not deal this as a safe integer. Then what we have to do? We need to keep this in a binding expression. Here we have to keep what? N. And actually this is suppose this is X I will give, because we will give the suffix as what? N. This suffix N refers to what? Big integer. This indicates big integer. That means using such large integers is not usually safe. So generally in JavaScript, how to use these integers safely? Actually, JavaScript provides one method. I will show you. Usually JavaScript, what it does is JavaScript provides a method. What is the method of JavaScript is? JavaScript provides a method called, max safe integer. Max safe integer is the method. This method is going to convert a large unsafe number into a safe number. In JavaScript, generally we do this. For example, already you learned in JavaScript, but just I will give a simple overview here. I will add some JavaScript file to you just to show you some JavaScript here. Script. Suppose, so you know document.write. So number have a max safe integer. Max safe integer is nothing but what? It defines what is the maximum number supported in JavaScript. This is max safe. That is the max safe integer. If you are using such numbers in JavaScript, then JavaScript, usually browsers will think that these are some unsafe numbers. Then it will block these numbers. It will not allow to use these numbers. Then we have to tell the modern JavaScript compiler that this is a safe one. Then usually what we do, such large numbers, when we put such large numbers, suppose we put some large numbers, we put with a suffix called as what? N. If you put the suffix n, then it is a safe integer. That n will not display, but it will be safely used in your JavaScript. So that is what actually this one. Exponent, you know, exponent, how it is defined? E. Exponent uses an E. 2E3, it is nothing but 2 into 10 to the power of 3, which is equal to what? 2000. Binary usually includes B, 1010, that is binary type. Hexadecimals usually uses X. You know, hexadecimal values will be there. This is just roughly I am giving. Later you will see others. Octa usually uses what? 0, O. O is used for octa. Hexadecimal, octa, binary, exponent, big int, decimals, double, float, all these comes under which type? This all comes under numbers. That means suppose you are using here, so 2E3, this is a number. That means it is going to display it as what? It is displaying as 2000. 2E3 is 2 into 10 to the power of 3, right? Suppose you are using here 0B1010. This is a number. This is what? Binary. It is a binary 10. It will display that binary 10 there. This all comes under what type? Numbers. Presenting number is okay. Good. But now tell me here, you learned JavaScript. Suppose we are displaying a number here. Suppose let's say price is equal to 45,000. Now we are displaying this price. That means I am using price and we are displaying that price. We are adding the price. Now when you add the price, you can see it is displaying like this. Now I am missing this 00. How to display? How to display those decimal values? In JavaScript you learned, right? How do you display those values in JavaScript? So JavaScript numbers have methods like toFixed. We can use toFixed. toFixed to fraction is 2 digits. That means toFixed to fraction 2 digits. Then it will put up to 2 digits. toFixed to the fraction of 4 digits. Then it will display 4 digits. The fraction we can define by using this. That's JavaScript numbers presentation. So that is the reason you may feel like I know about numbers. What is special in this? But if this question is asked to anybody, many people even don't know this. That means it looks like JavaScript very simple, but React people, they cannot break the interview because of JavaScript. React people cannot crack React interviews because lack of perfect and high knowledge on JavaScript. Because 60-70% React interviews will be on JavaScript. And not general JavaScript that you know. It is not about DOM methods and all. It is about language, very strong about language. So, and very advanced about language, which many old level developers are still not aware of this, right? So you need to have an awareness on this. So here, what is the next point is number binding. Number binding can use various number binding can use various JavaScript methods. Can use various JavaScript methods. What are the various JavaScript methods? Number binding can use various JavaScript methods. What are those JavaScript methods? One is toFixed is one method. And what is another one? Another one you regularly use, another one is toLocalString. toLocalString. So number binding can use various JS methods to convert. Actually, this is to convert a number into string or with fractions actually. So we have toFixed and we have toLocalString. What is the concept of toLocalString? toFixed is okay. That means syntactically how you do. We have where price is equal to some number. Actually, these decimals are missing in presentation. What we do? Price dot what? toFixed. toFixed to how many digits? 2. 2 digits. Right. Another option is toLocalString. toLocalString, suppose I want this to be displayed in a currency form. How you will display number in a currency form? That's a very general requirement. How you will display in a currency form? Usually in JavaScript, how you display in a currency form? We use toLocalString. toLocalString uses the local format en-in and it requires style. Which style? Currency. In currency, which currency? Currency is what? INR. Then it will get the currency symbol and display that. How you display numbers in a currency format? Usually we display numbers in a currency format. en-US and this is what? USD. USD, that is US dollar. So that means it depends on number. That means, for example, I defined some 1,45,000, but US format will be like this. And you changed the format here. That means how do you define the format? So this is, so en-in and this is what? INR. It changes that format. It will have 1,000 separator decimal places and a currency symbol. Usually we have to convert them into number and display into number. That's what we need to do. So usually we have price to local string. And in this, what we have to do? So in the local string, what we need to do? First we need to put an en-in, and we have style. Style is what? Currency. And currency is what? INR. That's how we present number. So converting a number to string and into various fractions, that is very important here. And what is next point is converting string, numeric string into number. Converting a numeric string into number, so requires, you know those methods, huh? What are those methods you need? One is parse int, another one is parse float. These are common. We use them as it is here also. In JavaScript, we use the same concept here also. Presenting numbers and dealing with the numbers. So that is parse int and parse float. So here we will use this one. That means no need to explain this. You already know, right? So that means a numeric string is converted. Suppose this we have a price. So where some value is there, value is equal to, this value is in a number form, means numeric string. And how do you convert into a number? Usually what we do, here we need to define, what is it? We need to use parse int or parse float. Parse float, what is it? Value plus 20. That means we are doing this and it is going to display the result. Otherwise, what happens is it will concatenate because it is a string. If it is a string, it will concatenate, right? Conversions, we already know how we can convert the value. That is one concept here. So these are the new things you should know about number. Means how to present a number. Binding data is a simple thing, but there are some techniques you need to understand to handle any kind of data, right? So this is number type. Second one, another important is we have a Boolean type. Boolean type, actually, you know, Boolean type will have what? True or false. But unfortunately in React, it will not display those true false. That means React cannot display true or false. True or false as value in UI. It cannot display true or false as value in UI. So you have to logically handle. And very important is JSX will not allow any type of statements. JSX will not allow any type of statements in UI. It will not allow any kind of statements. Everything you have to manage by using methods. Functions you have to manage by using methods. Statements are not allowed. Means what? You cannot write a if condition, you cannot write a for loop, you cannot write any kind of such statements. Selection statements, iteration statements, looping statements, jump statements, exception handling statements. You can't write in JSX. Then how do you manage? You have to manage everything by using functions, methods, functions that you have in JavaScript. That means what is the point here is, suppose we are dealing with, here, so stock. Suppose where stock. stock is equal to true or false. It's a Boolean. I am trying to display that here. In a paragraph, I am displaying stock. And how to display the stock? We need to display the stock by using the stock. Usually JavaScript can directly show true, false, but here it cannot display that. That means just not $real. It cannot display that. That means Boolean values cannot be displayed. So if anybody asks you like, then how do we display that? Is it true or false? The word I want to display. Or based on the logic, you need to display some value for this. Then what we do? We cannot use any if statements here. Then we can put a ternary operator. If stock is equal to what? True. Question mark, you can put as true. Otherwise, we can put as false. Then it will display that. You cannot show true, false keywords, which are possible in JavaScript. But this is not possible here. We have to handle through an expression. Through an expression. That means here I am just writing as like what? If true, then available. And if false, then what? Out of stock, like this. We need to manage that. Directly true, false, if you try to present and use it cannot present. You have to handle through the logic. That means you cannot write any statements here. You cannot write any statement. Suppose I am trying to write if condition like this is not valid. We have to handle all by using functions. We have to handle functions, operators. By using functions and operators, we need to manage. So how the Boolean is handled here syntactically. So where stock is equal to true, then here we need to present. So stock is equal to true, then we display true. Otherwise we display false. That is how we manage. So some important new points you need to understand. How do we deal with the number and how do we deal with the Booleans? Now, the other data types, we will see how to handle the strings. String handling is again a very huge one. You learned a lot of string methods and functions, right? You have to know all those string techniques here, right? A lot of string methods, string functions you learned, you have to handle them. That we'll see in next session. Tomorrow we will do that, right? Tomorrow we will learn all the data types. That means it is very important. Arrays, objects, how to handle in React. JavaScript you already know, but in React, these are very major things to handle. Tomorrow we will continue and we will learn about other types. Tomorrow we'll continue. Okay, right.